Okay, good evening. I would like to welcome new Christopher Chung. He's gonna jump in for a subnet talk because Christina couldn't make it today because she's sick. So I also have a little information about what you're gonna talk about, so please take it away. Thank you for coming.
Thanks a lot. So my name is Neo Christopher Chung. I'm very thankful for everyone who has organized and invited me to come here. And my talk and my artwork is called Coincidentally and Inevitably in a Place We Never Thought of. And this title just happened to fit extremely well for the Schmiede as well as this talk that I'm giving right now. So I'm gonna stick with it as my title. But at the same time, I will not talk as much about my artwork or art process, and I would love you guys to check it out on my website, because I think that we try to have more of a discussion about various topics that I will kind of pinpoint at, and I would love it if you will interrupt me and ask questions. That's why there is a microphone, and also it helps me to stop talking. It can be boring. So let's try to talk about a few things that I find to be how we all came, that we never thought about the place that we are currently in terms of arts and science, and also the physically that we are here now. So first, I am a computer scientist. I did a lot of AI and machine learning research in my history. And it's really interesting because I started doing statistics a long time ago when it was really, really nerdy. And now I feel like a statistic has become this cool thing called AI. And now it gets all the hypes and hates. And whereas back in the days, no one really cared about us. So it's a really interesting place to be in. And obviously, I'm also happy to make art utilizing some of these things. And I feel that there is a great synergy between art and science. And I try to kind of really hammer that thoughts as we go. All right, so first thing that I want to point, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and in South Korea, we are extremely poor. I mean, the level of GDP, Austria and South Korea, you can see that essentially this was, the South Korea in my time was a village, right? And back then, this was what South Korea looked like. We had dirt road. I lived in a small apartment where my parents, my two brothers, and myself lived in a single room on a floor, whereas there's another room taken by my grandmother. And this was, absolutely, obviously amazing, sentimental, but look at us now. We are in Salzburg. We are doing art. What am I doing? And that's what I think is coincidentally and inevitably in a place that I never thought of. Living in 90s, it was really rough. There was, as I mentioned, we had a huge, big family, which is very typical of back in the days. But one day, my mother brought this machine called Hytel. So Hytel is this device that was given 1991, I want you to know, was when South Korea got out of a dictatorship the first time ever since World War II. And coincidentally, they created this Hytel. And this thing was beautiful, absolutely most amazing device ever. So this was freely given to all the household, and it was freely available to connect if you have telephone. And these were absolutely just a beautiful device that are portable, cute, and tactile, and I loved it, right? I think that in a way, a lot of things that I do now, and that this is why I start with this, is that both arts and science that I really like doing is somehow connected to this first experience of this Hytel. I cannot even call this computer because it does not have a memory. It is purely connected over a telephone line, and you are getting obviously, extremely slow everything. So, no question there. And of course, that what I even loved more is obviously what's inside this beautiful box, right? And they created this amazing, amazing device. And I want you to think about this GDP earlier on, because we're talking about this was developed in 1980s. You know, we did not have a lot of luxurious things. I never seen a computer, right? I mean, we would be literally hungry a lot, right? We will never get ice cream. And these are like so yesterday for me that the fact that we are here now and I'm getting like so much food right here is already amazing, but also the fact that the software has developed so much. And the experience I had then was quite shocking for me. And many, many years later, when I moved to US, I saw this net art diagram, which kind of like gave me a more context for which that I thought the experience was so amazing. Obviously, the idea is that this beauty in the software is not that what I see in the screen, that it's happening in between. And it's obviously something many of us perhaps know and perhaps have seen this amazing diagram before. So the simple net art, this whole idea is obviously the net art, or a lot of computer art, is happening in between communication. What you see is just the surface of this complex phenomena. And I like to take this to kind of take a big leap. And what I call AI art diagram would be that, you know, the art is happening in CPU or GPU, right? I mean, we might see art or AI art in a very specific way, but the why it is bizarre or why it is beautiful or why it is inspiring is because it's something inside that is happening. I don't think that the stable diffusion or the LLM, what it is outputting itself, has as much power as what's really happening in those processing units. Okay, let's go back to many different ideas about this kind of things. And one thing that I found some time ago is this New York Times review on computer art. So essentially, New York Times predicted that very soon artists are no longer needed. The computers will make amazing art, and machine takes over our art process and making and creation. And I just want to point out that this was predicted in 1960s, right? It didn't come in 1980s, it did not come in 1990s, and it surely did not come now yet. I think that art is extremely powerful happening, and it will continuously work quite well, and including a lot of ideas using AI. Okay, so getting more to the AI and AI art, I think there's a lot talking about artificial intelligence. I personally, coming from more academic background, I don't see AI as some amazing being that is ultra intelligent. I see this as a continuation of computer science quest to be more helpful. And it's very interesting because, as I mentioned before, this rather arcane field of statistics and AI has become the hot topic, and so all the famous people has, bring their own opinions, and whether the AI is going to deliver so many improvements in quality of our life, or whether the AI has a goal and humanity has happened to be in the way it will destroy humanity, or the fact that singularity is already happening. These are wild speculation, and I personally, and I'm like to think that I'm correct, that they are all wrong, right? So the reason why they're all wrong is not because I know better about AI than them, it's because we can look back in the history and see how other technology has been predicted by other people, right? And we know what happened to radio, televisions, all that. But we can go even back. I tried to go back as far as possible in terms of the worst technology that ever came about. and it was writing, right? So the Plato said that writing is terrible, right? So it will create forgetfulness in learners' souls, right? You will only know semblance of truth, right? I mean, all of this, I mean, maybe true, I don't know, but I will take a big step. I mean, Plato was very smart. I mean, so was many other people that I don't want to name them that we saw in the previous screens. But probably this doomsday or utopia will not happen, right? The truth is somewhere in the middle, and we have to figure it out, right? And this is also really interesting because yesterday I was having a conversation with a meme lab, and meme lab declared war against AI lab. And I think that that's a beautiful just encapsulation of the Schmiede. And I hope that we see some ultimate takedown. Okay, so we have this understanding. I really hope that we have, kind of common ground in terms of how AI can be helpful, how AI can be amazing. But I will talk about my work a little bit. So I have a wide range of interest, and I will specifically talk about 3 things that I'm doing. And I obviously make art on the one end, and I also use and create algorithms that are underlying some cancers and other medicine including. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, so I'm part of a consortium called Inform. We are looking at deep learning for cancer images. So idea is that we take cancer images like CT, PET, MRI, and we want to predict whether the person has a cancer or not. And this is obviously a big problem because cancer is a leading cause of cancer. And as an example, like I just been in Zambia a few years ago. Zambia has a 0 oncologist in its country. So the idea of having AI for very, very complex diseases would be very helpful. But I'm not here to say that AI can fix this. I mean, I'm coming from a more scientific background, so I want to figure this out, right? I mean, can we actually help cancer diagnosis with AI or not, right? And I have heard actually some people asking me, like, what does it actually mean? Like, what does it actually mean to develop AI for cancer images? So I'm giving you like kind of very quick 1-slide overview. So this is like one of the research that I've done where we're looking at this new AI model called Transformer, right? Very famous. It's used in ChatGPT and every other technology that you know. But now in this case, we are used for the images, right? So here, what we are trying to do is that we have, as you can see, there's an existing and our method, right? So existing method does not actually able to distinguish in the pixel level whether the classified object is related or not. It's a very broad object detection, whereas ours, we are trying to figure out more specific object that is related to our classes. So for example, here we have a tench on the right side. That's a fish, right? So we are saying we have a classifier that knows that this image is like 98% fish. And then we ask, okay, now give me the pixels that are associated with that fish. So existing will be kind of all over the place in the middle attention map. And our new method, we are trying to find exactly where it is, right? And obviously, we are doing this in natural images because we want to be able to do this in cancer images, right? We want to say, does this have a cancer or not? Does this have stage 2, 3, so on? And this all like kind of come together in our app. So my work is deeply in AI development, but nowadays I'm more branching out into actually developing apps, visualizations, and human-computer interactions, which all comes down to making usable app that is based on the particular AI model, right? So we have, in this case, I do, and I'm just putting this out there to show that, in my opinion, this idea of whether we can detect latent diseases using AI is actually deeply related to, do we have technology, do we have visual app, we have a visualization technique that can actually bring these technologies closer to the users and doctors. Okay, that's my first research topic, and kind of moving closer, moving to the next topic that I'm really interested in is mental health crisis, which I also do in kind of a research as well as doing a startup company. So global mental health is a huge problem, and I just want to say right now there are 40 million people in their 20s, okay? 40 million people in their 20s worldwide is suffering mental health crisis, and WHO predicts that by 2030, the mental health will be the leading cause of mortality. And right now, leading cause of mortality is cancer, right? So it is obviously coming super soon, in like six years, if you trust them. And of course, that, as you can see on the right side here, shown by, reported by German newspaper DW, is that resource-constrained countries obviously have extremely low amount of mental health counselors and psychiatric doctors, right? So we have actually started working on this a few years ago, and the first thing that we did was actually trained a large language model on thousands of hours of real therapy sessions. So we have collected a lot of real human patients and doctors. They have sessions that are anonymized and they are publicly available. So we have processed this data and we have trained our own model. And we wanted to make this more available, right? We have included more algorithms and more ways to protect harmful contents, and we want to let's train it using various new technology that are coming up right now. But what we come to terms is, so academic research in terms of training this data and training this model has a limit, right? So what we need to do is actually make an app. That's why we actually decided to make a startup company where we are delivering this AI model through various apps that is available. And obviously, I encourage you to check it out, serena.chat. And it's really interesting. So what we try to focus on, and if you are a little bit familiar with therapy, and we are trying to focus on person-centered therapy. So person-centered therapy is a more open-ended compared to cognitive behavioral therapy. And so far, we had great reviews, and we are trying to make it more available. We try to make an app for iPhones and Android and so on. And this has been really interesting. As you can see that I start from very AI development and has come to more and more product development. And I think that this is where I am in terms of also the artworking that I'm doing in Schmiede, okay? So check it out, and I love to hear your advices, and I'm sure a lot of you, and I have heard this conversation many times, a lot of people are critical, very critical of making mental health counseling as a job of AI, right? I mean, I absolutely understand the criticisms and problems that could arise, and I am trying to work on the solution, and hopefully we can find interesting discussion to have. Okay, so coincidentally, inevitably, in a place we never thought of, so that is artwork that I have proposed to Subnet, and this actually comes directly from my work in AI. And my AI work has been always thinking about how do I solve a medical problem. And in the last edition in Serena, we basically have created this app. We have created this LLM that are trained on psychological counseling, and we are trying to provide these services to the other people. And the questions that we start thinking about is, following, right? So we have this chatbot. How do we evaluate this thing, right? We want it to be helpful. And how can we tell it is helpful, right? I mean, the survey of the users are great, right? But can we do something better, right? And is it even possible that we can characterize a personality of AI? And obviously, there is lots of pros and cons, but at least coming from providing a helpful service, this is inevitable. And I decided to take this into more artistic practices. So this has been my multidisciplinary research, and I'm making this media installation. So hopefully the installation will be coming soon here or elsewhere. And this is hypothetical. I'm trying to basically use many cell phones and trying to create this installation. We'll see. So I will close this rambling of my 3 different projects with the sum of the thoughts that I had about my wide different ideas that I had. So you all know, famous message, the medium is the message. And I think that this is really interesting for me because I feel that, at least in my art making, I try not to make such a strong statement. I feel that it is pretty much given. And this idea of a media culture, obviously well articulated in 50s, I think that we are coming to more of a machine culture. The machine culture is, I feel, accelerated version of a media culture. We have computing devices. We have machine learning algorithms everywhere. And of course, what is the culture that arises from endless processing of our thoughts and love and process? And this is already happening, right? I mean, this machine culture is not theoretical. So for example, there was a research comes out last year from Germany. Essentially, they look at a very real, tangible intermixing between AI and human culture. So one of this is essentially they look at chess and Go players, and they realize that top players right now are actually learning from the top AI because the AI has overperformed human long time ago. So then obviously the human players are learning from the AI. And you can actually see this strategy playing out in the top leagues, right? And this is, I think, really interesting because obviously we all are being influenced by various apps, Tinder or Instagram or Facebook. We are what we are consuming. And all this is to say, what is the role of an artist in this particular environment? So I look at System Aesthetics, one of my favorite books because it is a very short. Maybe it's not a book, it's just a pamphlet. And essentially, Jack talks about how the best artist does not have to be anything separated from the technologist or scientist, right? I mean, the scientists and technologists are artists, and we look at the best artists in the history back in the days, at least the one that are my favorites. We try to just simply look at the world as is, and we try to look at a little schism between these realities that we live in. So hopefully we can all become an artist and try to pinpoint this the weirdness in the world. Thanks a lot. That's my talk. All right, so any questions? Any criticisms?
Who wants to start? So from your point of view, why do you think we are so deeply in love with dystopia?
Dystopia?
Yeah.
I think because the world has been dystopia. I mean, the world has been terrible for me.
I'm not so sure about that. I mean, is it really this dystopia? And I think it's a more feeling we're having in our soul that we're continuously romanticizing with dystopia, from my point of view. Like we love it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm actually joking because I personally see, like as I mentioned before from the beginning of the talk, that for me, the world has been amazing for me. I mean, this title and the place that I'm in and economic growth and all that is that we are, for me, inevitably has been progressing. And I do not wish my children to live in 1980s Korea, right? I mean, there's absolutely no question about that. So I am very hopeful. I'm quite optimistic. I don't necessarily think that AI is gonna be that helpful in creating our better world, but I think it is us, the humans, that will make the world better. But I don't know why people are so pessimistic.
Yeah, so far they've been helping us from my point of view, and they've been solving our problems. So one answer is that we're actually problem-solving machines, and we are running out of problems. And then the new problem so abstract that they're really scary.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting is that AI as a tool of dystopia, people think about it so much. And it is really interesting. So for example, it's interesting to be in Schmiede where everyone's are extremely highly technical. All of you use extremely high tech, but you draw the line between using your M2 MacBook and the AI. That is a very fine line to draw, And for me, using AI is just like as Plato did or various other people have just been afraid of the new thing over and over again. And I believe that we can hopefully we will overcome that.
One more time. And I think the funny thing is many times, to what extent do you see that the technology we're using and taking a step further, actually the technology we are imagining, because very many times the technology we're using does not correlate with the technology we are actually imagining. So even if you go back to Plato again, if you go back, I'm not sure how you say it in English, it's this Höhlengleichnis, like the shadow, the shadow thing. I think we are really much more, our imagination is many times the problem, not actually the tools we're using. Because we are projecting so much of our fears and so much of our hopes onto our tools, and then actually we kind of subordinate ourselves to our tools. And I just heard, recently I heard this thing, once you, I think even David's not here anymore, David said that once you start using a tool, you become a tool. So how do you deal with that?
Absolutely, yeah. I do think that this simplification and over expectation of AI is really clear because, so I work at my university in Poland. I develop AI for cancer images, and the crazy thing is that it's not there. I mean, the AI cannot detect cancer yet as better than human being, right? And when I talk to my friends, when I talk to my parents, everyone's are like, oh my God, gold mine, make a company. I'm like, no, we don't have an AI yet. We don't have the technology, because if we did, we will be curing cancer, right? And this idea that when you talk to people that I am working on AI for cancer, people immediately think it's already solved problem, when actually in reality it's so far. We need a lot more investment. We need a lot more people working on. Imagine all the people who work for Google for ad, which is what Google is, work on cancer imaging, right? Imagine what different world we can create. So it's not about the dystopian or the ideas that we have. We actually have to work on the things that can benefit the humanity, I think. Yeah.
I have a question about the data that I have to submit to the app's arena, because I thought, yes, on the one hand, it is very interesting, and it's also a big step forward in mental health, which could be available for a bigger crowd of people like this. But on the other hand, I think, as in a lot of other apps and programs, of course, but still, the possibility of misusing it is also quite high, of being in the end, and yes, this is again dystopian, but still it being misused and people who are using it being manipulated. So what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so I absolutely agree with you. And in my opinion, the reason why we work on this is that the only way that we can stop Google, Facebook to have all the apps is someone to work on it. You know, we started this project as academic process. We've collected a lot of data, we trained, and then we've been training it over and over again, trying to make a better AI, right? And right now, if you go to a website such as, no, I will not say these words, but they are amazingly not safe for work or girlfriend AI apps that are existing right now that use the same technology, right? And these apps are extremely addictive, extremely developed, far beyond Serena, right? So the idea is that, okay, how do we create an app? How do we create a startup company that is not purely depending on user addiction, right? So like, how do we actually help people? And obviously, these are all the questions that I'm also trying to use in my artwork. So idea of like, how do we evaluate users is not obviously by retention, right? And so I think that I absolutely agree with you that there is a huge danger of people misusing it. But at least from my perspective, only way to do it is to then create your own. Because otherwise, Google will surely take advantage of it. There's no other way to do it, right? And kind of having this like AI model is also a lot of like process, right? I mean, you have to do it now, right? I mean, in 20 years, 30 years later, it'll be impossible, right? I mean, if you want to make a Google search engine right now, it will be impossible because you cannot crowd the world, but you got to start somewhere. And I feel that this is a good time to start something and see where it goes. Yeah.
No, it was just speaking about dystopias and why we are so fond of them. And maybe also in relation to AI, I think a large big thing in all of this is agency, or the lack thereof, or rather people's feeling of lack of agency. And because the more things get automized, the less agency people think that they have, and the less influence. And I'm just curious how you envision to re-enable that feeling of agency, because I think this is really why. Not only is it why we have a dystopic tendency as such, but also why people are not engaging into things that they need to actually engage into. For example, the climate crisis, or I mean, the list goes on. There is a ready-made dystopia right there to interact with. And if the starting point is like, but it doesn't matter what I think, it doesn't matter what I do, this all happens anyway. Do you have any idea of, I mean, except for your honorable kind of like ideas and ambitions, because that sounds great, and we need people like you to counter the big players for sure. But like, what are your thoughts on that? How can you actually how would you then, being in the middle of the development of these tools, how would you think that we can re-engage people potentially through the use of AI or structurally?
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, I don't have a old answer for you, but I will give you one example. And perhaps I already know that I'm taking the idea of agency very minimally, perhaps. But I just want you to know that I just give you one example, one anecdote of the AI being used for breast cancer. So obviously, breast cancer is one of the biggest problem in the United States. And the most well-used AI in medicine right now is some dude created an AI model that is available on the website. And he actually created, he's from China, and his friend died from breast cancer. But in China, where she's from, there is not a lot of resources to actually have a very smart oncologist and a radiologist. She had the picture. She had an X-ray mammogram, but she didn't have someone to look at it and say, you are having late-stage cancer. And so he actually developed this app, and now it is available on a website, and it is literally just the most widely used like AI for cancer. And in that sense, I think that we are giving the agency back to the people. I mean, taking the radiological picture is quite, let's say, non-specialist job. You know, take the X-ray, take the CT, and now you have to interpret them. And it turns out that the resource constraint settings are pretty much the majority of our world. And at least in those settings, we are giving a lot of agency back to those people. Yeah. And I'm sure that there are some examples that I cannot imagine for Austria or South Korea, because we are well developed, so you can go see an oncologist quite easily. But you know, I do think that that's an example of that we can create a model, we can make it available to the people, we can make it cheap or free, and at least that's one way I think we can do. Yeah.
Any more questions?
I would like to know more about how Sirena works. Is it just like giving like text-based, language-based answers? Is this everything that is doing now, or do you envision some developments in which people with mental health issue are able to get like how to bridge the linguistic help with some concrete, tangible, like embodied support or somatic practices or in-person sessions?
Okay. Yes, that sounds basically kind of our plan, like long-term plan. So, but I just want to say from the very beginning, at least there are a lot of different therapy styles or school of therapies, but the two big one is a person-centered, which we are taking because we do not see this type of therapy available as AI, right? But the more popular one, and also that are more popular in outside of AI, is CBT. And then CBT is currently kind of like a de facto standard, and which is that essentially we are very focused and we're trying to fix the behavioral problem, which then impacts the cognitive issues. So I'm not saying which one is better. I'm not here to talk about that, but at least what we're trying to do is that we're approaching it from a different angle. We are approaching it from a person-centered, which is more about open-ended discussion about my problem. And me talking through the problem is essential for the overcoming the challenge. And we are using lots of therapy sessions that we have, and we are, these are all, let's say, real therapy sessions, and we are using them. And we are also trying to essentially do what we call reinforcement learning from human feedback, which is that we are trying to kind of guide the model as we think, or we are using real sessions to guide them through. But just to give you a really interesting thing is, because we have read books on the therapy session, and this is like kind of going back to this idea, and this my artwork, and this idea of how do we engage AI and how do we evaluate is actually really hard, because real psychotherapy sessions are really chaotic. Like if you actually read the transcripts, basically if I give you a transcript and I ask you, do you think that this is a real people or AI, I'm 100% sure more than half of you will get it wrong, because these are like really unusual conversations. And it's not like in our chatbots, right, we are expecting people to be like, I'm having this problem, right? This is not like that, right? I mean, people are just kind of like barfing their ideas and emotions and problems, and then we're expecting professional therapists to say something that somehow encapsulate this and provoke further like reflection. It's really hard, right? So going back to your question is that I don't really know. Like, we are trying to figure this out. And that's also, in my opinion, my artwork is about. It's like, I don't want to say I know how to do it. I want to say, like, I'm looking at it. I'm trying to really understand this critically. Yeah? Thanks.
Do you only use transcripts so far, or do you also somehow train it on facial expressions, pauses, timbre of voice, etc., etc.? I mean, there's so many other levels that you're communicating with in a therapy session, right? Mm-hmm. More than the actual words.
Yes. So we do not use any other modes of interactions because we don't have the data. And we would love to. If there is thousands of consented, anonymized recordings, but thing is, I don't think that's possible. I think that the idea, I mean, I'd love to, absolutely. And that will be really interesting, perhaps as an art piece. It can be very interesting. Yeah.
Hi, you also had on one of your first slides the question of the personality of AI. Is that connected to Serena, or can you explain a bit what you were thinking about asking this question?
Yes, so, I mean, so, you know, I take AI, I mean, I take AI very seriously. I also take AI whimsically. I take AI critically. And in one of the things that we want to do in this installation, as well as in Serena, actually this is like totally connected in my view, is that as an example is that we want to provide a therapy in a different styles, right? So you could imagine that you know, the different subgroup, different subpopulation have a different way of approaching therapy or a therapist. So that therefore there should be different therapists, right? So then we can immediately say, okay, that on one hand, we can say this LLM is trained on different data, or it has been, you know, reinforced learning has been done on different data. But also, we like to think about this as a personality, just because I think that this is a good metaphor for understanding AI. And in my installation, I'm essentially trying to create multiple personalities and kind of having this conversation over this room as we are like walking through. So in that sense, yeah, that's my way. What do you think?
Especially if you train Serena to having a certain style of a therapeutic view, I think you would have to imagine a person, or at least somebody who would work along these guidelines. So for me, this makes kind of sense. On the other hand, I mean, AI isn't supposed to be like the real person, or is it? That is also something I think a lot of people are asking themselves. If there should be a distinction or not, or how close we should or can approach.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a good question. I don't have an answer for that. I usually don't, but I don't think that it's, so I think that philosophically it can be really interesting and really important, but as I mentioned, like I take AI really seriously and I'm like programming and like, you know, pulling my hair, but at the same time when I make artwork, you know, I want to be far more philosophical and just kind of explore both ends of the possibilities. Yeah.
My question would be, is the Serena model just being trained initially and then it's served statically in the conversations with its end users? or is the Serena model also learning from the conversations you're having with the system during execution? So on the app, does it directly learns during your interaction as the app grows and user base?
Yes. So right now that it is statically served. So we trained in batches. So there will be like new model that is available. But right now when you're typing in, that model stays exactly same yesterday and tomorrow, right? But of course that your history is used to inform AI what you have already talked about. So that your session will remain consistent over days, right? Until you decide to delete them, but yeah. But of course that it can be really interesting to actually continuously train as people talk about it, but there is I mean, this is, to be honest, absolutely, this is not an ethical question in my opinion. This is more about like, do we really need to do this, you know? Like, do we really need to like, we have trillions of documents, and then now we add this like extra little bit, and then like, do we really spend all the money to like train it again, you know? So it's a more technical questions of like what would be the most efficient way to do it. So right now we just do it like maybe every some months when we have enough data. Yeah.
I think we're slowly coming to an end. So therefore, I think we're having a finishing up question. Does anyone have one? If not,
Can you just tell us a little bit more of this first South Korean computer? Like what, because there was no, I have my own reference, not the same, but that actually had a memory, and that was back in the 80s. So what was its intention? Tell us just more about it. I'm super curious. I have no idea.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I will try from my memory because my memory is very rosy. So I'm sure it was a terrible computer, but in my memory, no, you have to understand that like we are literally living in third road, living in a tiny room, sleeping on a like really hard floor, like literally hard floor, right? And one day my mom brings this thing, and this is like, we didn't even have a TV. I just wanted to know that we never had a TV when we got this thing. So when we got this thing, this was everything that I ever seen before. And basically you can plug in the telephone jack, and then there will be a message board in it and there's essentially, I guess, a central server somewhere that is essentially, outputting the same messages to everyone, and you can make small messages like, what is the interesting things to do today or something, and people like read them, reply them, and of course that later on there was more multimedia, but it was like extremely poor that we never got to, right? So I remember like having this and trying to like read what other people are doing, and even back then it was a cesspool, right? But the experience was amazing. I mean, right? I mean, this clicky mechanical keys and this tiny thing, and you can move this whole thing, right? And you can move from one room to another, and it was amazing. And obviously there was like terrible text to be read. So we can talk more about this afterward, about the cesspool. Yeah. And this was actually a copy from the French system, like very successful Minitel. So if you want to read more about it, search Minitel, because Hightel is obviously not much information. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your talk. Continue in smaller rounds outside.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.